Am I the asshole for leaving my surprise wedding because I felt blindsided?
No.
That's yeah. Immediately,
That's
I'm
my
like,
worst
what
case
a
scenario.
setup.
That sounds awful, frankly.
Okay. Last week, I, a 30-year-old woman, was invited to a supposedly fancy party by my longtime boyfriend, Mark, who's 32. We had been dating for 5 years, and while we had discussed marriage before, there were no immediate plans for a wedding. Excited about the event, I dressed up in my best attire and arrived at the designated venue. As I entered the grand hall, I was completely taken aback to see all of our family, friends, and acquaintances gathered eagerly waiting. It turns out, Mark had orchestrated an elaborate surprise wedding for us without my knowledge. Everyone erupted into applause as I stood there, shocked and overwhelmed. I just felt a mix of emotions. While I love Mark and had dreamed of our future together, the idea of getting married without any prior discussion or consent felt like a breach of trust. Really?
You don't say.
Strange. So I pulled Mark aside and tried to express my concerns and reservations about the surprise wedding. I explained that I wanted a say in the planning process, to be part of the decision making, and to have the chance to prepare mentally and emotionally for such a significant milestone in our lives. However, Mark dismissed my concerns, saying that he thought it would be a romantic gesture and that I would be thrilled. In that moment, I faced a difficult choice. Go along with the surprise wedding, putting on a smile despite feeling unsettled, or stand up for my autonomy and voice my true feelings. I ultimately made the decision not to proceed with the surprise wedding, much to the disappointment and confusion of our guests. Now I find myself at odds with Mark, our families, and even some of our friends who believe I overreacted and spoiled a beautiful moment. However, I firmly believe that a marriage should be a joint decision with open communication and shared expectations. Everyone's excuse for this is I have always talked about marrying Mark. And again, the problem isn't marrying him. The problem is not having any say in my wedding. Mark thought I'd appreciate it because I always spoke about how stressful planning a wedding must be. Yes, I think it's stressful. It is, but I'd still like to try planning one. After this whole ordeal, everyone asked if Mark and I were ending things, in which I replied no. I emphasized to them that Mark and that I still wanted to marry him, and most feel like this is making me more of an asshole since I just wasted a perfectly fine wedding. So, am I the asshole for refusing to attend my own surprise wedding, even though it was intended as a romantic gesture? There's an edit here. I previously omitted this from my post because of the subreddit's word count guidelines. I love surprises. It's a thing everyone has known that I love. Mark knew that. The fact I wanted to marry him and said wedding planning was stressful, thought a surprise wedding would be perfect. A surprise engagement is bland because it will always be a surprise but not a wedding, LOL. He threw this wedding for the surprise, but explained how in a couple days we could do a courthouse wedding to make it legal. This was his only way to surprise me. I love spontaneity, but legal marriage or not, I wanted a say in my wedding, to choose the perfect date, to choose my bridesmaids, to pick out my cake. Again, due to these thoughts, everyone thinks I'm the asshole because I could have gone along with the party and do a redo legal wedding. But again, I felt blindsided and confused, so I left.
You're not the asshole. Fake your death, change your name, have a fun new life.
Well, there's an update. I want to start off by thanking everyone for the responses I got and the advice. However, I would like to reiterate that Mark is a great person who did a stupid thing. If you knew me, though, a surprise wedding seems like something I would love. Unfortunately, I didn't. After talking to Mark, we both got to the conclusion that we didn't do anything wrong. Both of us are valid in our opinions, and the situation was an odd one. Unfortunately, Mark spent a lot of money on planning this wedding, as well as family members. He doesn't think that we have the funds to plan another wedding until a couple years. Ooh. I will be honest, that choice is really messing with me. I'd like to be married sometime soon and start out a life as a family. I know weddings don't have to be extravagant. We could always throw a small party, and once we have enough money, do a second one. But I don't know if that's what I want. I honestly feel selfish and regret not using the surprise wedding. I feel like I wasted a bunch of money. I used to stand by my choice confidently, but now I'm not sure I made the right choice, and all this stress is wearing me down. Anyway, I'm staying with Mark, probably will get married soon, and have my dream wedding in the near future, hopefully. Again, thanks to all the responses, and I hope people from Am I the Asshole also see this post.
You did nothing wrong. You reacted in the moment. And you wasted no money. He wasted the money. I'm sorry. No.
Am I the asshole for helping a friend in a bad situation on my wife's birthday? I, 28 male, have a friend called Sarah, 28 female, whom I've known since childhood and has been there for me my whole life. I owe her my life, and she's always been my go-to when I've got problems. I want to make this clear. Romantic feelings have never been involved. We have a brother/sister relationship. My wife, 29 female, has never liked Sarah. Since I had her as a best woman at my wedding, she calls her a pick-me. She went as far to suggest I cut her out of my life when she became pregnant with her first child, but we worked through it in couples therapy. Since Sarah has always been there for me, I've stepped up for her, with taking her to appointments, building the nursery, and even promising to be with her when she gives birth. She grew up in foster care, no family. My wife has become extremely hostile to Sarah, which has caused fights. To make up for not being there as much as I should, I planned a special birthday for my wife, a whole day and night being treated like a celebrity, with a fancy hotel, dinner in an expensive restaurant, shopping trip, and spa. Unfortunately, Sarah went into labor 6 weeks early and rang me in a bad state, begging me to come to the hospital because she was scared. I told my wife everything, and she started to freak out, saying it was her day and Sarah wasn't going to ruin it. I told her to stop being childish, we can celebrate another time, or she could ask a friend to go. Then she told me, don't come home without a paternity test, which hurt me. I'd never do that to her. But she wasn't listening. She just left without saying another word. I'm currently with Sarah in the delivery ward, well, getting a cup of coffee. That's why the story is rushed. I've been getting so many angry calls and texts from both our families and friends. Unfortunately, I tried getting in touch with my wife, but I'm blocked on everything. I feel like helping a vulnerable person in a situation like this trumps a birthday, but I still feel guilty. Am I the asshole?
This one's kind of hard for me.
This is a tough one.
Yeah.
Am I the asshole for telling my boyfriend's mother she raised a fucking sociopath who needs to be in a facility? So I, a 26-year-old woman, have a boyfriend who's 24, and recently he got into a dispute with the neighbor's kids. They accidentally kicked their football into our yard, and they came into the garden to get it back. To be honest, I didn't care, but my boyfriend started screaming at these 11-year-olds about how they are poorly raised and their parents should be ashamed. I was fucking mortified. I sent the kids some chocolates and sweets and apologized profusely for his behavior. I was seeing red flags and told him this behavior was not normal. He kind of brushed me off, and I told him if he pulled anything like that again, he was gone. The next week, the ball came into our garden, and I was about to throw it back to the kids when my boyfriend stormed outside and took the ball inside. I told the kids that I would bring it back in a minute. He went into the bathroom and emerged 10 minutes later wearing gloves and a football covered in shit. His own shit. What the f***? I asked him if he was out of his fucking mind, but he stormed past me and threw it over the fence screaming, "Take that, you bitches."
Shane.
I screamed, and girl, I mean screamed at him about how he was a fucking douche, and I wanted him out of my house, and he is a disgusting fucking monster, that they were just kids. I screamed, and eventually he left. I deleted all his games off his PS4 and gave it to the kids as an apology. I was so embarrassed. My ex-boyfriend's mom messaged me asking what happened, and I responded with, "What happened? What happened?"
Yeah, right.
You are a pathetic excuse of a woman who raised a fucking sociopath.
Wait, wait.
He covered a football in his own shit and threw it at some kids, and he needs to be in a facility because something is wrong with him. And God knows how I hadn't seen any red flags about the fucking monster you raised during the 7 months we dated. I know I am in the right for what I did to my boyfriend, but am I in the wrong for snapping at the mother for something she had no direct involvement in? So that's poopball.
Try to take advantage of my sister's disability? Enjoy being disowned and arrested? My little sister, henceforth known as Holly, is mute. She can whisper a little, but it takes a lot of effort on her part. She's been mute ever since she was 5, when she lost her ability to speak in an accident. She's very smart and she's a good-looking kid. At the time of these events, she was 16 and I was 21. Me and my sister live together in an apartment because my mother is a roamer who isn't well suited to take care of a teenager. She has our twin siblings, but not my sister and I. My dad is distant from the family, so helping my sister through high school falls on me. I work at a car part shipping company, so I get paid just enough to get by. Because of our relatively poor living situation and my sister's inability to speak, she gets bullied at school. Generally it isn't much of a problem, but in the few months leading up to these events she was having increased problems with it. At the time, Holly was 16, but she was a sophomore in high school due to failing a year in middle school. Because she's good looking and is older than most of her class, she gets attention from juniors and seniors. It's mostly negative attention, but there was one guy who I will refer to as Dio from now on who treats her really nicely. He's a senior and at this time is 18. He repels bullies from her because he's a tall, handsome, tough guy and bullies don't want to mess with him. I don't interfere with them because my sister is visibly happy when she comes home from school and whenever she's around him. I didn't let them hang out alone together, but supervised them hanging out a few times. Anyway, after a few months she stopped coming home happy. She isn't hanging out with him anymore either, and although I ask her multiple times she won't tell me anything about it. I confront him about it and he evades the topic. At this point I'm suspicious, but I don't know what to be suspicious of. I'm getting more and more worried about Holly, so I go to her counselor and assistant principal to ask about her activities at school. From what I learn, she still spends all her free time near Dio at school. I find this strange, since she doesn't seem happy anymore. A few days later, I invited Holly and Dio on a dinner night to Olive Garden. While we're there I do two things that are completely illegal. First, I steal his phone, which I've seen the password to, and second, I read his texts and emails. I do anything I can to find out what's happened between them. I don't find what I'm looking for, but I do find out that he drinks and smokes 420 with his friends on weekends. A few days later I find his phone in the laundry, and say it must have ended up in one of our coats by accident. I know for a fact he got it back, because he called me to thank me for having Holly return it. I still didn't have what I was looking for, so I went back to the school and used his previous texts as grounds to check CCTV for any suspicious activity. There wasn't anything suspicious by school standards, but there was something that caught my eye. It was my sister, going to the central bathroom in the school and him going to the boys' room of the same bathroom about a minute later. The bathrooms are separated by a wall, but there's a janitorial closet that opens into both bathrooms and is completely in the blind zone of anyone walking into the bathrooms, let alone the CCTV cameras. At this point, I began to suspect that something was happening between them in that bathroom. It was the only one with a closet like that, and if my memory served me correctly, the closet didn't have a proper lock. It just locked from the outside on both sides. Now that I suspected something, I confronted Holly about it. She broke down crying, and after 15 minutes of consoling, she shakily signed to me something that made my blood boil. Apparently, it was far worse than I expected. I had thought they were going in there and doing substances or something, since Dio was the kind of guy who would pull that kind of thing. As it turns out, according to Holly, he brought her in there one day, closed the doors, held her down, and assaulted her. He told her that he would know if she told anyone and he would hurt her if she did. Because she physically could not scream for help or make any kind of loud noise for that matter, he got away with it. The worst part is, he was threatening her into meeting him there every couple of days and doing that to her. I was livid. My first instinct was to call the police, but I realized that there was no evidence except the testimony of a mute girl. I wouldn't be satisfied with police intervention anyway. The first thing I did was call Holly in for a week off from school. The next thing I did was find out where he lived. After that, I planned the most brutal revenge I could think of. My first step was to break into his house. It turns out his parents go out a lot, and he leaves to smoke and drink with his friends. I knew from reading his text that there was a spare key on top of the porch light in the backyard. That Saturday, I scoped out the place, and waited for everyone to leave. I then began phase 1 of my revenge. I went into his house through the back door and found his room. I smashed his PC, stole his wallet, and pissed on his bed. Then I poorly hid 2 small bags of weed in his house. Finally, to hide the fact that it was targeted, I tossed up the rest of the house, but didn't take anything. I then went to a Starbucks and used the Wi-Fi and Dio's debit card to purchase a bunch of sex toys in his name and send them to his house. I then left his wallet sitting near a homeless man sleeping on a park bench. Next, I contacted his parents and told them I had seen their son drinking and smoking with a group of teenagers. They were furious, which leads me to believe that wasn't the first time something like that had happened. Finally, I went to the back road he walked on his way home from his drinking parties, which I had found out in a text from one of his friends. I waited for 2 hours in some bushes for him to walk by, and then jumped him. I demanded his money and phone although I knew he didn't have his wallet. I kept one hand in my hoodie pocket, pointing it like I had a gun, which he believed. He handed over his phone and ran away. I then finished up my plan by using his phone, which I still had the password to send an email to the school from his school email, confessing to roping my sister in the janitorial closet multiple times, as well as possessing substances on school grounds and drinking when he was underage. Then I snapped his phone on my knee and went home. My sister went back to school the following Monday, armed with a can of mace I bought her. Dio wasn't at school, and she was called in by her counselor. She told them the whole story, and he was charged with rope, underage drinking, and illegal substance possession. On top of that, his parents completely disowned him, and he was expelled from the school. Who's the most entitled person you've ever met? The neighborhood mom who told me that I should let her son sexually assault me. This happened when I was 15. A boy in my neighborhood would often catcall me and try to grab me. He was around my age. I had told him to leave me alone. I had complained to his parents, but to no avail. When I told my parents about it, they just told me to ignore him. One day, when I was walking home from school, he caught up with me. As usual, he made some filthy comments about my body and the things he would do to me. I walked faster in an attempt to lose him. I just wanted to get home. But he grabbed my arm and lifted up my skirt, exposing my underwear. I effing lost it. I began punching and kicking him with all my strength and with all the rage that had been building up inside me. I didn't stop until someone pulled me off of him. It was his mother. She screamed at me for hurting her little boy and told me she would be speaking to my parents. I said fine and walked home. I knew it would get ugly that evening, but his blood on my knuckles made me feel a little better. That evening when my parents got home, Karen was already waiting beside our front door. Apparently, she had been messaging my parents all day, telling them about the beating. She berated them again in person. The boys will be boys defense was used. Here's the fun part. My parents actually apologized to her and promised her they would discipline me. When she left I told them my side of the story, but my dad just repeated what he had said earlier, that I should have ignored him. And, icing on the cake, he told me if I didn't want to draw the attention of boys, I should lengthen my skirts. Never mind the fact that I had pretty much been assaulted. My mom told me to grow up and be more ladylike, instead of getting into fights with boys. My two brothers who were younger than me were much more sympathetic. My 13-year-old brother said he'd get his friends to gang up on him if he ever came near me. Thankfully, it never came to that. The coward never harassed me again. I guess getting beaten up by a girl can really kill a misogynist's confidence.